Welcome. Today is February 10th. This is the PEG Access Advisory Committee meeting. My name is Carlin Reed. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm just letting you know that this meeting is being videotaped and recorded. I'm going to do a roll call here now that I can see that we have a quorum. So when I call your name, please say present here or whatever other indication you have. Vince Carlson.
Here.
Scott Hopkinson.
Here.
And I'm Carlin Reed. I'm here as well. We may be joined by Corey Atkins. I'm not sure if Court Booth is going to be able to join us, but we do have a quorum. So let's move ahead. Today on today's call, we're going to be looking at a couple things. We've got the minutes of January 6th to go through, double check on the future meetings for the next couple of months. And then Kate Hodges and Aaron Stevens have graciously given us some time. They're going to be going through, along with Mark Polly, an update by the studio, by MMN, and also an update on the budget that we've already circulated around. After that, we're going to do a quick renewal, Comcast renewal update, and then we'll get an update on broadband from Scott and Vince, liaison comments, public comments, and then adjourn by 2:30. That's the goal, at least. Okay. All right, let's start off with the minutes, January 6th. Vince, I've looked at them. These are the ones you circulated this morning. I appreciate you doing that. I've had a chance to review them and I didn't find any corrections. Scott, are you okay with this, or do you have any corrections, or have you had enough time to look at the minutes? It's 2 pages.
I took a quick look and I'm okay with them.
Okay, all right. Then Scott, can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I move that the motions be accepted as presented by Vince.
Thanks. And Vince, do you want to second that?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call vote. Vince Carlson.
Aye.
Scott Hopkinson.
Aye.
And Carlin Reed, and I say aye as well. Thank you very much, Vince. You've given me the final version. There were no edits. So I'll just go ahead and I'll take care of sending it to the clerk's office to get them posted. And with that, we will be completely up to date with our minutes for the last 12 months, which is really good. Good job, guys. Okay, touching briefly on the next meetings, I've got scheduled down here Thursday, March 3rd from 1 to 2:30 p.m. by Zoom. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the budget in the sense that there may be some, since Court's not here, he wanted to have a chance to ask some questions about it.
Could you repeat that date again? I'm sorry.
And that's what I'm about to ask Scott, if it's okay with you. Thursday, March 3rd. It's March 3.
Yeah.
From 1 to 2:30 p.m. Is that okay with your schedule, Scott?
Yeah, for now it is. Yeah. Let's.
Okay.
I mean, of course, I would have a preference if we could do some of these in the evening, but.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I'd like to start doing something in the evening, looking at the April meeting, having that as an April meeting. That would be April 7th. That's a Thursday. Now, Vince and Scott, could you check your schedule for that day?
So I can also tell you that the fiber committee has been meeting weekly and trying mightily to get done with their work in less than a year. And our standing meeting is Thursday evenings, which includes this evening. So I have 2 meetings on one day, but I would, if there was an option for another day of the week, that would be great for me.
Okay, so you would prefer a Friday the 8th, for example?
Which month again?
I'm sorry, looking, this is for April, trying to set that time.
Yeah. Yeah, Friday would be better, or Wednesday would be better.
Okay, all right. Let me do this. Let's plan an evening meeting in April. And Kate, I'm going to ask if that's okay with your schedule. I know it's an imposition on you to come in after work hours. I think there will be some questions about the budget in particular. Are you available in the evenings? Look at April 6, 7, or 8. That's a Wednesday, Thursday. Well, actually Wednesday or Friday, 6th or 8th of April. How does that look for your schedule?
Let me just check. So it looks like the 6th, I have a night meeting. The 7th is not a problem. The 8th is a Friday night, which I would be happy to spend a Friday night with you all, but
Actually, yeah, it
I'm not
wouldn't be
sure
my
you want to
first
spend a
choice.
Friday night with me.
You know what? Let's just leave it. Let's just leave it Thursday during the day, if that works for everyone. Do it the 7th at 1 again, and I'll. I like to say I've been in the computer industry for 45 years. Computers don't care when you work on them. So,
Well, I do want to accommodate your request, Scott.
no, that's fine. Just let's leave it at 1 o'clock. The fact that it's once a month keeps it tolerable. So just do that.
Okay, all right. So then that'll be the April 7th at 1 o'clock.
Harlan
And that,
Reed,
I'm sorry, Mark.
this meeting.
Mark, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't on mute. Sorry about that.
Thanks, no problem. And I'm presuming that we're going to be able to do this by Zoom, even though it's after April 1. I heard that there's legislation that's pending that will extend our ability to use Zoom till July 15th. Kate or Aaron, do you know any more updates about that?
Just that it is been widely popular. I think that the powers that be are reaching out, and I know that there are many folks that are in my position and Carrie LaFleur's position in other communities that are also reaching out and letting the legislature know how advantageous it's been for the community. So.
Please, in other words.
I mean, I will say personally, I depending on what the subject matter is, sometimes in person is helpful, and I like to have that connection with people, but I understand that the idea to have a hybrid is really advantageous for people to be able to participate. So.
Okay, well, the April meeting, I'm hoping will feature you again, and so that we can start talking about doing the request for quote for
Yes.
the cable consultant. That's my goal for April. So it's important that you're able to feel comfortable and that you'll be able to attend. And of course, you as well, if it's working with your schedule as well. Okay, so let's do this. Meeting tentatively right now by Zoom on April 7th at 1 o'clock. If things change, I'll let you know. That's 2 months away, so we've got some time to deal with it. Okay. All right, that takes us through the April meeting. What I'd like to do now is, let's see. Oh, a couple of quick announcements. I worked with Jason Bolger, our town CIO, the last day or so, to make sure that the PEG access email address, good night, Scott, actually works, and it does work. We verified it today. So if someone wants to send a message to the committee, it will come to me directly. I don't know if it comes to Aaron, if it comes to you as well. It does come to Aaron as well.
Yes, it does.
So pac@concordmad.gov is a viable email. We've tested out today, and that's now working. Okay, let's see. I've got a couple of notes here just to see if what we need to discuss before we get into the MMN update, which is going to be the next thing to do. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and go through that. I'm going to turn the floor over to Kate, Aaron, and Mark. And Kate, I don't know if you want to do the update from the staff perspective first, or if you want to do the budget first, but it's your call. So go ahead, Kate.
Oh, sure. Well, I think maybe we could take a staff update first, only because the budget, will take longer and probably require more discussion. So I will either hand that to Erin or Mark or both. I'm just the numbers gal.
I think we'll tag team it today because I was, this is my first week back. I was out for a couple of weeks. So Mark was graciously handling most everything. So the biggest update that I have is that we have interviewed for 2 more videographers to help us out as our workload continues to increase, which is a good sign. We're happy to have more to do and helping the community more. So we have a couple of promising candidates that we're working through that process with, and we are hopefully going to be bringing on a couple more people very soon. So Mark, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
Well, Matt Breen is on the call, and he's one of our lead producers along with Tori. So he's a new hire since, Matt, has it been almost a month now, I think, right?
It's been a month exactly.
Yeah. So earlier you met him and he was saying hi to everyone. Tori's here hard working on another project, so she's going there. And then what Erin said about our new videographers that we've been interviewing. So that's who we are now.
Great. Okay. All right. Any questions about the updates from Scott or Vince?
No, I do have, I guess I have one quick informal question. Just, I wonder if you could share a little bit insight on how long it takes you to process town meetings, such as, for example, Mark, who is on, of course, and I are on this fiber committee, and we're trying to keep our minutes up to date, and it seems like they're kind of lagging. And I just sort of, maybe, has that been something you struggle with, or can you comment on that at all? Or does it take a long time to process them? I know you have to do the beginning and the end. Do you sit through the whole middle of the thing?
No, typically we don't sit through the whole middle. We'll take a look at the waveform of the audio and just try to make sure that it doesn't have some giant swings.
Okay.
Sometimes, however, the meetings start recording, and then 45 minutes later, the actual meeting starts. So we don't know when the meeting starts. We have to listen. So that could take 40 minutes just to find the beginning going forward. Because you can't, because some people just say, you know, they talk about their dogs and their cats and the electric vehicles and things, and we don't really, if we don't catch when that, you know, they don't officially, they're not as good as Carlin is for some. So, you know, Carlin will say what the meeting is, what date it is, we've now started, and there's kind of like a gavel, you know, at least inference. The ends are typically the end, so they're easy enough to do. So that's why we say sometimes it may take 15 to 20 minutes to get one started, and then it runs and processes for 45 to 2 hours without a person. But other times it takes just 45 minutes to find the beginning of the meeting. So, you know, we try not to publish the personal conversations that people end up having. We hear them and we get flushed, but we don't let the public hear them. So
I did make an announcement about that at the last chair's breakfast, to please remember that when that mic is on, it's a hot mic.
yeah,
And it's
that's
recording
great.
it, and people will actually listen to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I've had people say that committee members now spout it back to me, saying, well, you do know the recording is on. So, so that message is coming along. I did hear at the select board meeting, a comment, Mark, from one of the select board members asking when the meetings were going to be posted. And it specifically FinCom was one that the select board member was interested in seeing. There was also one about the Board of Assessors, but some of the more important committees will have a higher interest level. And
Sure.
it usually takes about a week, doesn't it, to get it?
No, there's 3 meeting types from both towns that when we get the meeting Zoom, if it's a Zoom meeting, when we get it, we process it that day. So there, with Jeremy leaving, it's been hit or miss sometimes. But the select board, the finance, and the school committees, when we get them, we process them that day. Sometimes a week goes by before we get it, and that's, you know, we wait until we get it. We can't we can't do it without it. So
Yeah. I mean, our particular experience is we were trying to clean, we have all these minutes because we're meeting weekly. It's a kind of an overhead for our work. And I was trying to clean up January 6 minutes, and the recording still wasn't available. So that's a month. And that's not to say that you guys aren't in. My sense is you guys are inundated with these meetings, and so your backlog is pretty deep.
no, we are doing them when we get them, and it may take us 2 days. I try to tell everybody, give us 2 weeks for all but those 3 meeting types, but typically it's within 2 days that will actually do it. But if we're at a big meeting for 3-4 days, it may take us longer, but
Okay,
if we
well,
haven't got the meeting.
I'll follow up with you offline. This is not a committee thing. This is
I
more
was
of
gonna
a,
say, Scott, if you're not seeing the meeting, make sure that that's been sent. Because not everybody knows to send it to us right away. And sometimes they need a reminder.
Yeah,
So
I don't
that's
know
what
who records
I
your
was
meetings.
trying to raise my
Kate,
hand for that. What Mark is not saying, because he's trying to be correct, is that depending on whom the Zoom administrator may be, they may not remember to send the cloud recording over to the people at MMN.
that's what I was suspicious of. Yeah. Okay,
We've
thanks.
been working on an internal message that, gently reminds the first time and then hits folks over the head, theoretically, the second or third times. And so hopefully that will not be an issue, and we have things in place. But I just wanted to remove any thought that it was MMN's
No,
fault.
yeah. Actually, and Mark Howell's on, so I don't know if he gets the indication or Jeremy gets the indication. And if it's all of us goes back to Jeremy because he's managing Zoom for the town, he could just automatically have a redirect, but it's just a suggestion.
Yeah,
So that,
Scott, I'm going to call on Mark here, and then we get back to the agenda. Go ahead, Mark.
yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, thanks. Just briefly, we do seem to not have anything since our December 23rd meeting. Chris Carmody's been setting it up. It's not clear to me as a chair, when I get Zoom credentials for a meeting, who the Zoom administrator for that meeting is. I guess I assume it's the person that sent me those credentials. I was just going to make the suggestion that if there is a set of steps that could be followed by committee chairs or clerks to facilitate this, then it'd be a great thing to bring to the chairs meeting, which I believe is next Wednesday morning,
Yes,
to try and
I'll
help
be
out
sure to
with
make
this,
an
because
announcement.
it is super helpful.
I'll make an announcement about that for sure.
Thanks.
And we do have a new Jeremy. Her name is Robin LaFrance. So I'm assuming that that'll be part of her task and such.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we've sort of been missing since I think the transition when after Jeremy left and Chris has been sort of doing it. And we've been on several different Zoom sets of credentials, so we may be kind of shifting around. So I had sent a whole list of what we had used for each of the meetings that was missing to Greg Marcinik about a week and a half ago, and I think he was gonna send that over to you, Mark. I don't know if you got it, but I'd be happy to forward it again if that is helpful locating these things.
Yeah, so it's just go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so we've been working on automating slightly that process so that they're not sending it to me, that we're sending it to an email account that we all see here. And that is now MMN Zoom, the number 2, YouTube at concordma.gov. Anyways, I sent out an email to Erin. Erin can forward it. I've sent it also to the people that I typically get emails from. Carlin, I sent you a copy also. And that can be sent to other people that are the chairs of those admins if would. But we'd like it, instead of sitting on Friday nights in my email box, it sits in an area where all 3 of us can see it, and then we can jump on it and get to it as even faster. But more importantly, we have a place where we can see the trail, because sometimes I spend 4 hours researching something that we never got, and I don't know that, because it may go to Tori, it may now maybe go to Matt, it may go to me, who knows. So we're trying to just have it better organized on our side. So we're going to keep getting better. That's all I can say.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Good discussion points, Scott. Appreciate that very much. Vince, did you have something? Go ahead, Vince.
I had a comment for Mark on when the meeting actually starts. It would be great if maybe as a handout, MMN could provide some clapboards, the ones that go like this.
I
wish we had
gavel idea. I want to get a big gavel and say, start, start, start.
Yeah, that's the alternative, is the gavel.
Clapboard, that'd be clever. All right, we've got some ideas for you, Aaron. There you go. All right, let's move on. Let's start talking about the budget now. Kate, go ahead, and you've sent the budget to us. As I understand, this has already gone to the printer. So this is what's going to be showing up in the enterprise book, right?
Yeah, but actually, Erin and I just had our budget hearing. Can everyone see this? With accounting on, my
Yesterday?
goodness, was that Tuesday or yesterday? Well, it was one of those days. And we changed a few things. And it's nothing substantial. It actually doesn't necessarily affect the bottom line. But one of the things that we wanted to represent, if in the budget that was sent before, it essentially shows that there was a loss of revenue, and meaning that we were spending more than we were taking in. But actually that wasn't accurate because it was counting in capital, and the capital that we have really depends on the monies that we're taking in. So we asked town meeting to appropriate the largest amount we think we may spend. But if what we're seeing in Comcast revenues isn't going to match the rate of spending, then we don't spend as much. So what you'll see in this budget is that we have parceled out capital. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is you'll see that capital is parceled out, generally speaking, in enterprise budgets, but because the PEG budget is a special revenue, it's a different way of doing it. So this, while it looks very similar to years past, that capital was never called out. But I wanted to make sure that we were doing that so it didn't look like we were being irresponsible.
Right. Now, just for clarity's sake, the document that you sent to us, the difference is in the line item that's on this operations tables under supplies and materials, right? That's
so under supplies and materials, we moved the $12,500 that we had earmarked for the consultant regarding the Comcast agreement.
Yep.
We had initially, if you recall, had that under, if I'm showing here, we had it under, where are the personnel?
It was under, it's up.
It's line 52. Under professional project specialists. That's where you had it.
Right, so we moved that because it isn't technically an authorized position, and I was concerned that it made it look like we were adding headcount when we were not, because consultants are not headcount. And so we moved that amount down. And the other thing that was changed is if we come down here to this, where it says net income, what you'll see is that we have the operating revenues, which are the same as what we were projecting, and the expenses. Now, this number does not include capital. So these are just the expenses for operations. And it leaves us with a net income effectively of about 19,500.
Right.
If you were to go down where it says available resources, we talk about this net income. So that's this number here, now plays down into here. And then it says the net available for capital. And effectively it has this 58.5 because we could potentially use reserves in order to make up the balance, which is the point of the reserves, is to be able to have money for capital expenses. So our capital program for FY23 is $58,500, and if this will cooperate, and
I see the number there.
includes
Yeah.
right here, includes all of these items, which if for some reason we get through the first quarter and we are very off in our revenue projections, we would then alter this so that we're not spending more out of the reserves than what would be reasonable or responsible.
Okay, let's stop there for just a moment and backtrack and get a higher view. What are the basic revenue sources on the amounts? I know it has on the chart, but just give us some numbers. And then what are some of the major expense drivers? Go ahead.
Sure. So we are predicting the Comcast or the franchise fee, which is assuming a 5% reduction. We've been seeing a reduction, and if I could show you here, we've been seeing a reduction over the years that has not risen necessarily, other than this one right here, the April and June, hasn't seen a total of 5%. So that's a very conservative estimate. I think we could probably get away with perhaps having a 3% decrease, but I want to make sure that we're budgeting relatively conservatively, particularly as we go into a year where we're going to be renegotiating. So we're carrying a 5% reduction in franchise fees. And then in the Carlisle fee, we're keeping the Carlisle fee the same as it was last year. We're really waiting for them to finish their due diligence with their new their new Comcast agreement, and trying to figure out what, if anything, they want as far as expanded services. I can say that in preliminary discussions, they don't want to remove anything. The only things that they've been talking about is adding headcount. There was an idea perhaps that they wanted to take on the P part, so the public part of that operation themselves. But then it was leading to a conversation about how they would do that with the equipment, other than the equipment that they have in-house. So I think that there's more work that they have to do, and Erin will be reaching out to Tim Goddard in the upcoming weeks. Like she said, this is our first week back, but to just try to button that up. So we kept that the same. And then this is the payment in lieu of franchise, which is the CMLP telecom sales. And that was done on a percentage. So it's 1.5% of the broadband sales with a cap at $60,000. So the forecasted 2022 broadband sales were a little over 1.45 million. And so 1.5 of that amount is about $22,000, or the amount that you're seeing here. So that gives us a total operating revenues projected at a little under $400,000.
Okay, I'm going to take a question at this point from Mark, because I think he's going to ask a question about the peel-off. If it's about something else, let's hold off. If it's about the peel-off, go ahead, Mark.
It is specifically about that. I was wondering if we could potentially go over the history of that a little bit. I'm also noticing specifically to the mechanics, that represents a 16% increase over the prior year. I noticed that from the CMLP published forecast for 2022 that they are in fact carrying the same 21,923 number. So that's a good thing. But their overall revenue their sales projection is only up 13%. So it seems like this is growing faster. I note that this is a new cross charge between enterprise activities that came in last year. And, you know, considering how, let's call it specific and careful the town is about one enterprise being subsidized by another one, I feel like there really needs to be a little bit more fulsome discussion and about where the rationale for this is. I also note, and this is my last point, and then you could take them in any order, that on the CMLP budget, they're categorizing this as a payment in lieu of franchise tax, which clearly it's not a tax. It's a, you know, it's an enterprise transfer. And so I think that it's important that both the rationale and the mechanics of this be much more clearly spelled out. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Kate or Erin, if either of you could give a little bit of history of it. My personal question is, how did you folks come up with 1.5%? I'm glad to see that the light plant and the PEG access have the same numbers. That's nice, but if you can give some background, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So you may or may not recall that 2 years ago, we started talking about the idea of what would happen if and when the Comcast franchise fees become so small that the operation can't sustain itself. And that sort of was something that was discussed at town meeting when CCTV was being dissolved and the town was creating Minuteman Media Network. The discussion invariably led to the conflict in how is it that we will run a municipal broadband, and we want to publicize that. We want people to essentially switch from some other carrier to our own, and yet doing so will have a negative impact financially on another enterprise. And so the former town manager, Stephen Crane, said that he thought that it seemed reasonable to have a payment in lieu of franchise, in which basically has MMN benefiting from people switching over to municipal broadband versus having that switch, which is a positive thing for the community, affect MMN negatively. It was discussed at the general budget hearing, and I believe it was discussed in several forums, which I was not part of, where the town manager and the finance team worked together on this. The 1.5 was half of the aggregate total of the amount that we were seeing the decrease. So let me explain that a little better. We were taking all of the decreases that we were seeing over a 24-month period, and it was about 3%. And 3% seemed like a very high number. And I think it was determined that we would start and perhaps end up with half of that. So it effectively is 25% of the projected loss of revenues. Whether that should be rediscussed, given the shift in town management, is sort of up to the community. I would say that while it is always lovely to have another source of revenue, right now, Minuteman Media Network is able to sustain its operation without this transfer. I think the impetus behind bringing it forward was because there was a lot of concern, both at town meeting and on the committee, about what would happen if. And if our answer to that as a collective group is we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, that's fine as well. But that, I believe, was not the feeling that the former town manager was getting. I think he was feeling like there needs to be some discussion and some planning for what is believed to be the inevitable. Does that answer most of your questions, Mark?
Yeah, it does. To be clear, though, it doesn't. What I didn't hear was, in my recollection of the town meeting around taking on MN, and didn't involve any specific expectation of how that was going to be budgeted for. I'm not sure whether the finance committee has ever taken a position on this. And we should note that the franchise fees that are received are around cable television, and there's a lot of dynamics going on in that. Cord cutting and people using streaming services and changing where they're getting their video from is rather independent of what they're using for internet service. So I think that this is a really good time to discuss this. It was always clear from the time that MMN was becoming a town entity that its funding was a particular source, and maybe that would need to be revisited. And so, Carlin, I guess from your committee's perspective, I think spearheading this, it's probably makes a lot of sense to have a really strategic discussion. Does this belong in the general fund? Does it belong, does it work in some other way? And I think it's extremely timely now because, even in the last 2 years with the pandemic, and really 3 years since MMN came on board, there's been, you know, a real significant change, I think, in what its role is. The public and educational used to be the main thing, and now we're seeing, and we just spent time in this meeting talking about the value on the government side. It's always been valuable on the government side. I'm just concerned that, you know, broadband as an enterprise, which I'm sort of representing at this stage with the interest in fiber completion, is also in startup mode, has had to pay its own way in every single instance. And so, you know, a discussion about making, you know, underpinning this particular function off of broadband revenues, I think is something that at the very least probably needs to be explicitly spelled out in policies and maybe even in town meeting action, so that we're clear about exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Mark, I appreciate you bringing this question up. I would like to have a more fulsome discussion of it next meeting as well,
Okay.
when Court and Corey have a chance to give their opinion. But I'm actually curious, Scott and Vince, I'm just taking an informal poll if you want to talk. How do you feel about having this particular transfer of funds? And I'll go with Vince first and then Scott. Vince, what do you think?
Well, just to put one more kind of a number as a comparison point, Comcast is paying a 5% franchise fee. And that really is unrelated to PEG. In a sense, it is a fee that is allocated for the privilege of putting cable in the town through the streets, and the need to maintain that, and the really any other expenses that the town might have in terms of actually dealing with the physical maintenance installation of the cable. So 5% is a number anyway, in thinking of the the payment in lieu of franchise.
Okay, thank you, Vince. Scott, what about you? What do you think about this payment in lieu and franchise?
So there are a couple payments that the fiber committee should, or the fiber business should pay, that I believe are relevant. One is this one, and one is it should be paying to the town for the use of the fiber infrastructure, because that was paid for by the ratepayers. And I have to go back and look and see exactly what their expenses are on those two different fronts. Obviously, the one we can see because it's coming towards the Minuteman Media Network. And I do agree with there is a potential for loss of income as if the Comcast winds down. The one thing I guess I would say is, and I don't have in front of me what our current income from Comcast has been over the last few years, but we know that their gross income from the town, that includes all their services, some of which may or may not be part of this franchise fee, like broadband, like alarm services, like phone services, is actually going up in town. And the other thing we know is their footprint in town in terms of the number of subscribers is fairly substantial. And one thing that I think I've seen from our conversation in the Fiber Expansion Committee, we don't have hard evidence of this, but it strongly suggests that a lot of people are going to stay on Comcast for a long time. It's not going to be when we observe, I think Braintree, Braintree, I think it was, they ended up splitting their services between 3 different services, but that's because all 3 offered content as well as the broadband. I don't know that that's going to be the case here. And so some number of people don't want the technology challenge of doing a cord cutting, so they'll stick with Comcast. And so I do think that it's smart to have some sort of payment year, and I believe there is some sort of threshold that's somewhere around 30% that changes the nature of that payment, and I don't know the details around that one.
Okay,
that's my comment.
Thank you, Scott. Kate, I'm not asking you to consider changing this on the particular budget. I just wanted you to get those 2 people's input on this particular, because we've not had that discussion. And the finance committee has not looked at this. I think they've de facto delegated that task to us, I think. I'm not really sure. But
Yeah, and I just went back through my notes because I just wanted to make sure. So we actually did talk about this. And we talked about it last year at the time that we went through the budget and then at the public hearing. And actually the notes that I have here say that this was kind of brought up at the public hearing, which doesn't mean that it can't be brought up again. It was at the enterprise hearing. And actually there was a notion from the committee, who I didn't attribute in my notes to anybody, that there was some degree of thankfulness that we were trying to come up with some other type of revenue sources that isn't Comcast revenues. So I guess I just don't want the takeaway to be that this was done in a vacuum. And so if it needs to have a wider berth to get buy-in, that's fine.
it was not done in a vacuum. I understand that. No, that's fine. Okay.
Just another comment on that franchise fee, in terms of what other communities do with that. Some or most, believe as best practices that franchise fee should be applied to, services like a PEG operation. And it varies widely, and there's an enormous amount of money in some cases. For instance, New York City, with all of its boroughs, gets something over $100 million in franchise fees per year. Dallas gets 120 million, I think. When there are efforts to track that down, and by the way, the FCC keeps no statistics on how the money is spent. But when independent, not auditors, but investigators, such as a few academic studies, try to track it down, it turns out to be extremely hard to track it down, just because of the way that various municipalities, do their accounting. So normally it's almost impossible to find out what gets used for other purposes and what actually gets used for PEG operations. And in the case of the municipalities that actually run their own internet service, it also varies in those areas. Most of them are probably more conscientious. So, a couple of the champs of municipal internet are Longmont, Colorado, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, as Gail Heyer often mentions. And they run, pretty robust PEG operations. So they're probably a little bit, more good citizens in that regard.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do now is appreciate the discussion on this point. I'd like to see if there's anything else you want to add, Kate, about the expenses, the operating expenses. I'm interested in asking a couple of questions regarding the capital. So I'm looking forward to getting to that discussion. But is there anything else, Kate, that you want to bring out about the operating expenses at this time?
No, I guess only to answer your question are what are the drivers, and like most, it's personnel related, of course. So the personnel expenses are equal to quite a bit of the budget, and it's about 337,000, give or take, and the non-personnel services are far less. Interestingly, we were able to knock it down quite a bit from FY21, where the other current charges and expenses, I know that that's going to look very large, but there was some buttoning up that we had to do of contracts that CCTV still had in place, or monies that was owed. So that's sort of a artificially inflated number there, but we were able to kind of bring it back. The one thing that I will say is that electricity and water are going up this year as far as our budget drivers, and you'll probably see that throughout all of the accounts if you were to look at the itemized accounts. And so those are large drivers for us. The purchase services that we have include web hosting, the Creative Cloud, and our contracts with Telview. And then, Medicare tax is equal to nearly 2%. The Social Security, which is for people who are not on the full-time pension benefits eligible, is about 6%. And then there's some other transfers. One of the things that I think I was asked perhaps by you, Carlin, was, the numbers for the personnel, are those the actuals, or do those put in whatever we believe might be the perceived, we call it a structure movement, but in the private sector, it's cost of living. And so I wanted to just point your attention to this 10,000 here, which is actually where we do that. So we take the actuals and we plug that in, and then if and when something is voted upon at town meeting as far as employee increases, we take that from salary reserve. For the general fund, that's a separate account. For enterprises, it's just essentially budgeted in, but in a different line item. So this 10,000 would cover employee raises, and it assumes about 4.5%. That's high. I don't think it would necessarily be 4.5%. I think we're probably leaning more closer to 3%, but we'll see that as time goes on. So I'm happy to answer any other questions if you had anything about expenses, or we can move on to capital.
Let's move on to the capital, because I'd like to see how the capital programs, and for my purposes, specifically in the capital, what are the plans for spending for the schools and the Harvey Wheeler Community Center? Because schools and council on aging are two of my concerns. So that's give you a heads up on what I'm looking at. But take
okay. Yeah, so I think I'm going to have Erin and Mark take the school one, and then the Harvey Wheeler I can provide a little bit, and I think there's more that is needed in terms of discussion on that. So why don't I let the school question get answered if I could.
Sorry, I was plugging my laptop out. What was the question?
The school capital. That might be a Mark question.
Yeah, this is for fiscal year 22, and if there are any school upgrades planned fiscal 23, doesn't look like it for 23. But
you said FY22, so you want to know what's happening right now?
Right now, because that's the question that Court had asked me to find out about. What's going on with the schools for FY22 and for F23. And his concern, I think, was mostly about Ripley, what needed to be done there and who was going to pay for it. So that's the framework.
So some of what's going on there is some small improvements were made, mainly to figure out how the equipment was working, and mainly just making sure that it's working as well as it can be. But major improvements have not been made there thus far. They've mainly been meeting over Zoom lately, so we have not been putting as much effort into that space. We are looking to possibly do some more work in the future, but we need to connect more with the school on that and see what those changes that may need to be made are, and who is going to be responsible for those. It really depends on what the changes are, if they're video and audio related, or if it's more conference room. I don't know if we are going to be upgrading their conference room for them. So there's more conversations to be had there.
Okay, Mark, did you have anything else to add about that? You've actually done some work over at Ripley in particular.
No, only what Erin has said is accurate. So.
Okay. All right. What about the Harvey Wheeler Center? How's that going? We're trying to get a couple of places in town that are wired and that have good audio and visual, not just for committee meetings, but for general public participation programs. What about Harvey Wheeler? What's going on there?
Sure. So I know that Vince had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting about the hearing assistant. And while that isn't involved in PEG and that's been taken through the town's ADA and facilities, it's given us pause on some of the other things that we can do audio visually because we want to make sure that they compare over there. Or I'm sorry, that they're compatible, not compare. So, you know, the idea would be which room do you want to start with? And I know, Erin, do you have more to say on that?
I was just going to say that we have been focusing on rooms that have been being used more often. So there was, you know, some work done over at the DPLM building because there was hybrid meetings going on there. Same with at the townhouse. But because Harvey Wheeler has been largely closed to the general public for such a long time, we weren't focusing as much on those spaces. Now that they're starting to host more programs and they're looking to possibly, we're hoping, start filming things in there again and hosting more community programs, we're hoping to look at that a little bit more and working with the facilities and the ADA teams to ensure that everything is going smoothly and that we can make any upgrades that are necessary.
All right, now, Carol, I know you're listening in and I know that you're the liaison from the Council on Aging. Did you have anything that you wanted to add or any reflections on this particular updates? And you're on mute, by the way.
Actually, no. I do not know, or I'm not familiar with what they want to have done and what, you know, so I can find that out what they're, if you haven't gotten something from Ginger, I can find out what they're interested in expanding for their video services, but I'm not aware of anything in particular right now that they're lacking.
Okay, thank you, Carol. All right, are there other questions from the committee members about capital? What we have for fiscal year 22, what happened then, and what's going to fiscal year 23? Okay. I'm trying to think if I had any notes here on this. I think that's it for me as far as that's concerned. Taking a quick look at I'm trying to click on the word Comcast. Of course I can't because I don't have control over this screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Would you please move down to the revenue?
Yes.
Comcast revenues. Now I looked at this and I was looking at a couple of things. If you take the numbers from 2017 to fiscal, fiscal year 2017 on down to 21. That's what I was looking at.
17 to 21. Okay.
Trying to figure out, 2017, 2020, 21. It's about a 5-year span. Okay. The revenues, if you tally up all that, is roughly $1.7 million. That's the PEG revenues that we received actually from Comcast 2017 to 2021. Do that. Now I was trying to figure out how much the PEG contract is worth. That was my goal. So what I did was I took those 5 years, and I don't know if that's going to be what it's like the next 5 years, but if you double that for a 10-year period, that means the revenues from the PEG revenues would be roughly $3.5 million. So that's kind of what the Comcast renewal means to us. Now Comcast, on the other hand, if you back out the 4.8%, and you do the algebra, the basic X over Y thing, it comes up that to Comcast, this contract is worth almost $71 million over a 10-year period. And I'm making that point to show that how important it is that we get the Comcast franchise renewal process done, because it does mean money to us, and we know that it means money to Comcast as well. So that was just a point that I wanted to make out of that. Okay.
And just so you know, I don't know if you guys can see off the screen or if you can only see the, but it looks like it's 3.8.
3.8. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a valuable contract. It's worth working on that for.
Kate, I don't want to say that you did it wrong, but I think you included FY22 in there. So
Oh,
And I was going just by the years, not the fiscal years, but the actual, the calendar years. That was my calculation. Doesn't really matter because I don't know what's going to happen next. I was just trying to get a sense of, all right, fine, what does this mean to Concord? What does it mean to Comcast? And what's the bargaining position between the two? Okay.
yeah, okay.
All right. Was there anything else that you had to bring up about the budget at this time, Kate?
No, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we backed out the capital, so it.
Yep. Yeah,
You
I
know,
saw. Oh,
had a
there
more
was one thing.
accurate-
Under personnel, you've got the media technician. Not media technician, the education coordinator listed, and it's part of the budget of about $50,000 under personnel.
Correct.
That particular screen, but you haven't hired one at this point. Am I correct in understanding at some point you do intend to hire an education coordinator? Or what's your objective for that?
Erin?
So our idea is that if we can get back into the schools and if we have that opportunity to make that robust program, then we're going to be looking at possibly hiring an education coordinator or some sort of similar position in order to make sure that we're getting the most out of the opportunity that we have to work with these kids, especially if we can continue to work with the middle school and high school.
Got it. Okay. Well, until you do, you've got that little bit of budget, not excess, but budget room in your calculations. Okay, that's all that I have in mind right now for the budget. I think we're going to be talking about it again at the March meeting when Court has a chance to come back, when Corey's here as well. What I'd like to do now is to move over to the Comcast franchise renewal process and the draft timeline that I had sent around. Vince and Scott, are you okay with that approach?
And I'm gonna jump just because I'm getting an assignment
Yes.
from across the hall. So thank you all.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Appreciate that. Okay.
I'm okay.
All right, sounds good. All right, let's put the budget aside for now. And I sent around a draft timeline to you folks. And since not everybody on this call has it, I'm going to put it up on the screen if I can figure out how to do this. Hold on. Let's see. You can try and figure out what to do for the next 2 years. And yes, it's a 2-year process from this point, which makes it all the more interesting. All right. Hold on. Let's see. Got it. There we go. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, this is what I have for the draft timeline. And I think I could just about get it all on there. Not quite, but pretty close. All right. The important, this is revised, and each time we have a committee meeting, I'm going to go through this and update as we go through. Because something that's occurred in the last couple of weeks is important, and that is deciding when we have to have the contract finished by. And this goes back to Court's question from the last week of, do we need to get town meeting approval for this contract? I've had some discussions with the town council about this. And I've had Erin and Kate on the emails along with this. And what it looks like now is out of an abundance of caution, we're going to assume at this point that we need to get town approval at town meeting for the contract. Okay, what that does is that means towards the end, and I'm on the second page here, can you see that December 21, 2023? Says 4 months to expiration. That's when we should be receiving the formal proposal from Comcast. And typically, that's the point when the real negotiations occur. When you say, okay, we want to do this, should we change the percentage? What happens? And up until that point, we've done a needs assessment survey of our community. We've had a public hearing on to gather input from the public about what our community needs and what our town needs for the next 10 years, and also evaluation of how well Comcast has been doing for the last 10 years, and have they complied with the agreement. But right about 4 months before expiration, Greg France from Comcast will send us their proposal. Now, here's the problem. If we have to have town meeting approval of this, the warrant will be finalized roughly February 1. Now, Aaron, I think that's about when this year's warrant was finalized, or at least when you had stuff sent to a printer, right?
Yes.
About the 1st of February. Okay, so we'll get the contract on December 21. We really should have one more public hearing on the proposal itself. And then and then send it off to the printer for inclusion of the warrant in February. That's not much negotiation time. And that's what concerns me about seeking town meeting approval for this, because it's going to squeeze us December of 2023. I just want to give you that place marker right now, because the franchise agreement doesn't expire till April 21. Our town meeting would normally be May 1st, May 4th, May 5th, somewhere in there. We'll have to get an extension of time from the Department of Telecom and Cable of our agreement in order to meet with that requirement. But what happens is we've got a 75-page contract that's going to be part of the warrant, because that's how long the document's going to be. This is a question mark. And what happens if town meeting rejects it? Okay, these are some things that are concerning me at the moment, but for right now, we're gonna operate as if this is our schedule, because we can lengthen it, we just can't shorten the time frame. Okay. So what we have here, we have a couple of major highlights of going on, and I'm going back to the first page. Here we are at the February 10 meeting. We're doing the budget and the timeline. At the April meeting, we're going to talk with Kate about the request for quote. And Aaron, I don't know if Kate will have one prepared for us at that time to look at, or if we want to talk about the outline of what should go in it. What is your sense of what she's going to want to discuss at that meeting?
So she'll probably be asking about what types of, she'll have some sort of a sample ready, I'm sure, that will have sort of the general outline and say, these are the things that we need to have to add into it. So that'll be things like what specifics we're looking for. Do we need a firm that has a certain amount of experience in this area, or are we looking for somebody who's familiar with working with Massachusetts, for instance? So getting some details as to what is important in this process, and then that will be put together by Kate and myself, and we will work on making sure that that is sort of up to snuff, and then we can bring it back to the committee for another look over.
Okay, all right. Well, Terry Ackerman, the chair of the select board, has said that she'd like us to come before the select board to get the select board up to speed on what we're doing, what the process will be. And she has tentatively scheduled us for April 25 for that meeting. Okay, that we'd appear before the select board with a 10 to 15-minute presentation on what the renewal process is, what the RFQ is. And my goal is to make sure that we've got the select board's okay to go through with the RFQ process. I've not done an RFQ, so I don't know what's involved. So Aaron, after this meeting, I'd like you and me to talk about how this needs to be changed, this timeline needs to be changed to accommodate the normal RFQ process, okay? Because I'm just pulling stuff out here, trying to figure out. But we've got this set up here. So April 7th, we're going to talk about the timeline. April 25, we're supposed to go before the select board and give a presentation on that one.
Carlin, real
yes.
quick question, Carlin.
Fire
You
away.
said you hadn't done an RFQ before. Is there a possibility that the previous RFQ for the last time we went through this would be available as a reference?
I don't know.
Might be rather valuable, since it may be little changed at that level. I should imagine the RFQ is, yeah.
We can check with finance. There are some differences in the way that they, what they require now.
That's true.
To be in RFQs, but we can check with finance and see if they have that and how far off it is.
Okay. All right. Okay, sounds good.
I think we're greatly missing Court Booth's presence today. You know, since he's been,
Yes, well, that's
he's been involved with this more than once, and so hopefully he'll have some input
right
before that April requirement, in reporting to the select board.
Okay. So this timeline basically has an RFQ to select a cable consultant, getting the consultant on board, having him or her or them revise the timeline, say, here's our goal, here's what we want to do, doing a needs assessment survey, having a public hearing, reviewing the results of the survey, and then trying to formulate a plan of what we think this 75-page contract should look like. So that's pretty much what I was estimating at this point. Again, this timeline is not set in stone. It's going to be revised as we go along, and each time we have a meeting, this will be part of the update for the process. Okay, Vince or Scott, do you have any questions about this?
No.
Okay, not this time.
Yeah, I do have a general question. I know that in the past, and we've had conversations about how much this committee should be involved in operations versus sort of directional pieces. How much are we expected to be involved in this, the actual helping steer the activity around this contract?
That's something I'm going to be talking to the select board about.
Okay, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the way that I envision it is the select board will make the final recommendations and will sign the contract. The town manager will drive a lot of the process and say, okay, we need to have this. And the role that our committee can do is help in fill in the gaps and fill in whatever information, because we don't have the authority to sign the contract, good Lord, no. Select board did it last time. And under an article that I passed around, I'm going to stop the share here because I wanted to pull up this other one. Article 37 that was done in 2015. This is part of the research. It's the PEG article that was passed by town meeting. I want to show this to you here. Under this article, it looks to me, this is just what the warrant looks like. And Article 37 was in 2015 was the PEG article. This is where they created the PEG fund. Okay, and the actual wording of the article, I'm going to have to expand it because it's kind of hard to read a little bit. This last clause, okay, this is where they create the fund, they fund it. It says, and further to authorize the town manager to enter into a long-term contract of up to 10 years or such lesser term as the town manager shall determine to be in the best interest of the town for the provision of PEG community access television services or take any other action relative thereto. That language is what prompts me to think that town meeting, its approval itself is not necessary. However, the current approach that the town council has asked and recommended is that we do get town meeting approval, even though this particular article was passed by the town meeting in 2015. It's the authorization. And then there's a question of how much of the contract has to be actually included in the warrant booklet itself. So we're going to work this out at some point, but I wanted you to be aware of this particular article. 2015 was passed April 12, 2015. Okay.
Yeah, in terms of putting the contract in the warrant, I don't think that's required. But you'll have to determine that. I mean, I'll just be surprised if we have to put the whole thing in there.
That's also something I'd want to talk to the town moderator about as well. Whoever
it may not be actually possible, by the way, because Comcast may mark it proprietary.
Right.
Although it may be discoverable. Because they don't want it shared with, just as the light plant doesn't want to share the negotiated rates. They recently published a 114-page presentation, and they redacted 2 pages that had to do with the rates that they're purchasing. Yeah. That may be something that Comcast has sensitivity around.
Well, the final contract has to be public. It is posted on the Department of Telecom Cable's webpage. Okay, we posted on ours as well. What happens up until it's finalized, I don't know. Again, to be determined later, but we'll work on it. Okay, I'm about done. I'm looking at the time frame. It's 2:15. We've got about 15 more minutes. I'd like to stop the discussion about the timeline here for now and go on to the broadband update and if there's any other public comments. So I'd like to cover those two next. Vince, are you okay with that approach?
Me?
Okay, broadband, that's Scott, Vince, go ahead. Whoever wants to do it, take away.
Well, not hearing any other, Mark could actually probably do this more elegantly than I could if you'd like to do it, but I can provide my input. We're in the stage now of developing a report based on expiration. We've organized the report outline and published and made assignments for the different sections that are in the report. I would say, to summarize, we've tried to break the report down into three broad categories. One is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? In other words, which places in town don't have fiber service? The second part is, what would it cost to address those services to those locations? And the third part is recommendations on how we might pay for it. So, the first part is, we got detailed GIS information from all over town showing exactly where locations were underserved. Mark's actually done a fair amount of work on parsing that up and characterizing the different areas, because we find there are different examples that are somewhat representative. Two very common ones are a homeowners association or apartment, such as Kai's Road or Concord Green, that are a barrier to deployment. Another one is an area that's adjacent to the edge of town or has already got underground utilities and there's no facility for bringing fiber in. These are, I would say, those are the typical areas. Mark, you might recall others. And then the second part is, what is it going to cost? We've looked into some alternatives there. We think there's some policy issues relating to homeowners, or, in general, we think there's a situation where between the broadband business from the light plant and the end user, there is a third party, which is often a homeowners association or a landlord in the case of an apartment, that has to be part of that process. And then how does that get negotiated? Where does funding come from for that? And then the third part is a little more financial related, which is what steps might be taken. And one of the concepts, among others, that have been discussed is, we call it the wheel of growth. Taking a page from Amazon's wheel of growth concept, but basically there are a lot of homes in Concord that have the broadband passing in front of it but do not take the service, and those would be lower cost to add. And once you do that, you can generate more capital revenue, which in turn can be invested in reaching these more difficult places. So that's the state. Mark, when are we trying to have this report in a draft form? I think it's April time frame. So we're on a pretty tight schedule.
It sure sounds like it. Okay, Vince, did you have anything else about broadband or anything else?
Yeah, Scott, in terms of something we discussed at the last meeting, where I promised I would send you some reference links, primarily from the FCC, that was already covered in the pile-off discussion. And, Kate described what's happened at the Finance Committee. So I had mentioned a 30% number, and actually that was not some percentage that appears in FCC documents anyplace, but the loss which would occur if Concord Light Broadband continues to add more customers, and Comcast loses at least a few more. So the boundary there is, the difference between the franchise or pile-off fees, which, either party would pay. There were a couple of other things that the FCC has issued orders and regulations on, and one of them is something that was passed and went into effect in early 2019, and that's basically the allowing internet service providers to build 5G antennas on new and existing poles nationwide. And basically it greatly reduces the ability of municipalities to prevent that usage. In other words, if Verizon wants to come in and say that they want to put wires on some existing poles in Concord. This FCC rule essentially lets them do that. Now, Mark, I don't know if that's actually come up in the past, and I'm not sure what Verizon would be using them for. Would that be for something like backhaul on their, their 5G network? Okay, I don't know, Mark.
I'm sorry, you asked me to start or Mark?
Well, either one, Scott.
Okay, so yeah, as Mark would have pointed out, actually there's a fair number of fiber running around town that aren't owned by Concord Broadband. And they would likely, anybody that actually has a cell tower now probably has fiber as a backhaul from that tower. It's very likely. Any place there's a cell antenna. So to answer that question. There is one other thing I should have reported on, just anecdotally. There's the ARPA funding, which is funding for infrastructure and broadband. We've been discussing that as one of the possible alternatives for providing funding for growth. We know that Sudbury in their town canvassed everyone and came up with $28 million worth of possible places where that ARPA fund could be applied, and they were able to secure something like $3 million. So, there's a lot of work that can be done in that area, and that's not actually something that's a function of our committee, but it is something we noted. But I thought I would mention it here.
Thank you for that, Scott. I know the select board had a special meeting on January 31. Talked about it, and that's something that the select board is still pummeling through. I did have a question for the broadband, fiber broadband task force. And I'll say it now, and if you want me to do it at the committee meeting, I can. How many low-income broadband users do we have right now? That is, people who qualify under the Light Plant's residential assistance rate program, low income, they're income qualified, and they also take the town's broadband.
I don't know the answer to that question. Mark might have that information. I can tell you that we recognize that Comcast has a program called Internet Essentials, which costs $10 a month. That right now there's no answer for that in Concord, and it's a pretty generous program. It runs, I've looked into it for someone, and it runs 60 megabits download. It's pretty substantial for $10. It'd be hard for us to beat it. As a matter of fact, financially, it would be a loss leader. And it's something where we've actually discussed in the fiber completion committee whether we should just let Comcast take over, deal with those, because they're loss leaders from a business viewpoint.
I'm going to give you one quick offering, and then I want to turn over to public comments, especially hearing from Carol on Council on Aging updates, if there are any. An idea I had that I've talked about before is the Light Plant giving a $10 credit on the bills of those who are already income qualified, and have that credit goes towards the broadband fees. Now, it's not getting broadband for $10, it's just applying a credit on the broadband component. So that's just something I wanted to toss out that I have at this point. Okay.
Well, there's two separate programs. Again, there is the Internet Essentials, which is a Comcast specific program, but the larger federal program is called it used to be called the Emergency Broadband Credit, and people could get $50 a month off of their Comcast bill per month, and that's reduced to $30 under the 2022 version of that, and that is called the Affordable Connectivity Program. Now, the definition of low income on that is double the poverty level, which nationally, I guess they're using the national figure and not the Massachusetts figure.
Okay.
But the poverty level for a family of 3 people is about $50,000. annual income.
Mhm.
And it's not clear exactly how many people that covers, but roughly 10% of Concord's population is eligible for either that credit or internet broadband, as far as that's concerned.
Vince, you and I might want to get onto the fiber committee meeting and talk a little bit more about this if they give us the opportunity about low income broadband stuff. What I'd like to do now is to give Carol a chance to give a input on Council on Aging. Carol, go ahead.
This isn't necessarily a Council on Aging, but it's a concern about accessing the Minuteman Network website.
Okay.
So last night I watched a live stream of the Lincoln Sudbury High School girls basketball game. And to get to the stream, I was told to go to sudburytv.com. That's all I had to do. And there was a, on that webpage, there was a watch pull down menu, which had links to live stream channels, but they also had a link to their program schedule for all of the PEG channels. So the way to get there is, all I had to do is type in sudburytv.com. In the February Council on Aging bulletin that just came out, the paper version, they moved advertising for Minuteman Media Network up to the second page. And they put a link in there to the TV schedule, https://concord.mass.gov/2339/TV-schedule. Now, obviously, people who get the version of the bulletin online, that would be a live link, but, you know, couldn't we get a concordtv.com URL so that we could just get to it easily?
Okay, Aaron, I think you're teed up for that one. Go ahead, Aaron.
So we do have an easier way to access the webpage. It's just minuteman.media. You type that in, it brings you right to our webpage. We also have our government, education, and public channels. You can live stream them all right there. I thought the COA knew that and they would print that, but
Okay, no, they didn't. I will let them
Okay.
know. So it's minuteman.media, not .com or anything, just minuteman.media.
correct.
Okay. All right. The other thing I wanted to ask a question on, the Internet Essentials and this Affordable Connectivity Program, do people have to apply for this? They don't get it automatically, right? Because I think there are a lot of seniors who are on Social Security only, and they would be interested in something like this, but how do you apply for it?
Yeah, they do have to apply, and actually,
I can
Judith
tell you.
Walls and Lauren Beretta started distributing some brochures,
Okay,
before the pandemic
Yeah.
hit, but I think that they have probably been able to update that since then.
okay.
Carol, there's some peculiarity about the Internet Essentials. I just want to warn you. If you type Google Comcast Internet Essentials, I would imagine they would get you to the page. But
Okay.
the peculiarity is you cannot have been a Comcast customer in the previous 90 days in order to take advantage of their Internet Essentials. Besides the financial commitments, you can't
Okay.
just switch from normal. You have to stop and then start, which is very strange, but that's the way they do it.
Okay.
That's also an opportunity for Concord Lake Broadband.
Mhm.
Okay, Carol, did you have anything?
Perhaps.
Yeah,
That was it.
okay, good. All right. Any other public comments? Any other liaison reports? Mark, did you have anything else? You're the only other public member here at this point. Okay. All right, folks. It's just about 2:30, and unless Matt has something he desperately wants to say, or Mark has a comment, go ahead. Anything else? I'm getting thumbs up from Mark saying well, it's okay for us to do. Okay, I'm looking for, Mark, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Just bye and thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks, Mark. All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
A second, please?
Second.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Vince Carlson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Carlin Reed votes aye to adjourn as well. All right, folks, that's it. Thank you very much and appreciate it. And I'll see you at the next meeting, which is going to be Thursday, March 3rd, 1 o'clock Zoom. Goodbye and have a good day.